was a kid, my parents tried to get us to memorize the story from Luke, the Christmas story. And I think there was bribes offered, like you'd get to go skiing. I got to go skiing even though I didn't memorize the whole thing, like my sister did. The part that I remember was, and this came to pass, because there was a sermon on it when I was little. And I don't remember what that sermon was about. I think I was too busy thinking about Christmas coming and the presents I'd get. I'm guessing that sermon was about how things come along and then they go. Both pain and pleasure in this life are very temporary. But our experience of those things, I've learned from my kids, our patience or impatience with it is about our own tolerance, not with how hard those things are. I've had one of the hardest Christmases ever. Part of that is having a kid who's in the hospital right now with complications and uncertainties. And like my 2-year-old who can freak out when he doesn't get the flashlight when he asks for it, or my little 5-year-old who freaks out when she can't have both pink felt pens and has to share one with her brother, I've been having tantrums too about there's too much snow, I might miss my ferry, and these kind of things. And I realize that when it comes down to all of these struggles, and I think about it came to pass, even though I know these things are temporary, definitely I feel like I want some kind of remedy right now. Like my pain or discomfort demands that I have some kind of solution. When I compare with the fact that my kid is in Tech Acute Care Center, a brand new facility of the Children's Hospital in Vancouver, one of the best places in the world for a child to be. And I think back to Mary and Joseph who, think about the kind of stress levels they had at this time. Mary was going to tell her parents, remember she's probably a teenager, that this new child had come from the Holy Spirit. And she's explained this to her husband, and, well, not even her husband yet. And Joseph, who's not even married yet, is understanding there's going to be a baby. And not only that, but they're in transit to take a census. And she's 9 months pregnant at this time of year. Now, I don't know whose job it is in the family to do reservations. That usually falls on me, and I've made the mistake of forgetting to make reservations before. Imagine the stress when they can't find a place, any room, anywhere. And this little newborn baby has to go into a place where animals are feeding. Really, I have nothing to complain about. Really, I have no stress. And perhaps it's just because of all the commercials that tell me that, if I buy this or that, I can have complete comfort right now or entertainment. But I feel like when I feel any kind of discomfort or pain, I need an immediate solution, and maybe you do too, whether that's, I need a break, or I need a drink, or I need whatever that might be for you, a getaway. What I've discovered is that Jesus coming doesn't take away any of our problems, doesn't fix anything that's going on for us right now, doesn't take away any of that pain or discomfort. And yes, there's the promise that he's coming back to fix things, but even that doesn't seem like enough in the time being. I know that we see in part, as we read in 1 Corinthians 13, and we don't see the whole of it now, and sometimes when we're in the middle of pain, all we can see is the pain. I love the verse, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed. Because Paul has a perspective that all of this stuff is so temporary, it's going to come and it's going to pass. But for me, I wonder what Jesus' coming has to do with right now. What about the pain and the stress of right now? And what I see is that he brings a seed of hope. He calls it a mustard seed. His kingdom is like a mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds that grows into this big garden bush that even little birds can plant on. And I understand that in Israel, it's kind of like a weed. You can't get rid of this stuff. It's around all of the roadsides. It's sort of like how broom trees grow on the island here. If I think about that mustard seed, what is this seed? What is this thing that he's introduced into the earth? If he hasn't come to fix it, and it wasn't that he just came to die or that he just came to promise that he was coming back, what actually did he do in bringing this seed? Not the kingdom coming, but the kingdom come. What is it? I understand it to be his church. As he trained these disciples and sent them out, there was a body, not of a massive amount of people at first, but just a body of people. And we read about in 1 Corinthians 12:27 that he calls us that body. Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. And this church body is going to go out into the entire world like it has, and it's going to change things, not by governments toppling by force, but by governments changing and toppling because people understand that their neighbor is valuable, and they understand they're valuable, and that changes things. And they understand that they don't have to just tolerate injustice, because there can be a change. There can be a change of heart. And you see things like education and things like healthcare, and you see even governments change and revolutions because of the voting, because of democracy, because of people seeing in this seed of hope the possibility of change. And this is really spread out through the whole empire. It even spread out through the Roman Empire, or through the whole world. It even spread through the Roman Empire to topple Rome, in the sense that Rome became a completely different place when transformed by this movement that Jesus started. And we, in modern day, can appreciate the community of church. A lot of people talk about, well, I like that, that's valuable. But they'd kind of prefer their own kind of church communities. I remember that Johnny Cash in one of his songs said, we want the church, but we don't want God in it. And when you think about the kind of churches that we make these days, whether it's the Church of Rowing, or the Church of Hot Rods, or the Church of Bike Repair, whatever community gathering or sport that you come around with other people, and you guys are a community, you guys are close. Those churches are fun, but they don't have God over them. And why would we want God over us, right? Who would want a boss if we can do this community thing ourselves? I've been reading some science and neuroscience in specific books in the last couple weeks here. Some friends were joking, is that what you do for light reading? And I'm sure there's some other nonfiction fans out there. I don't say this to brag because I don't understand very much of it. I'm not that bright. But the gist of what I've been reading lately is that a lot of the decisions and choices we make are not built upon rational thinking. They're not decided because of rational thought. They're decided much in the way that my 2-year-old would decide things, based on the bigger parts of the brain that are active in decision making, that are responsible for desire and need and anxiety. These things that about attachment, the things we might even call the heart, are the things that really steer our choices. And this rational thinking, well, it's a beautiful thing, really serves very little purpose. In fact, one author said the only purpose that this rational thought has is in convincing other people to agree with you in your community. I relate to that. I sometimes feel like that's exactly what part rational thought plays. And I'm not against rational thinking. And in fact, I highly value and prize it. And I realize that on the one hand, a person like myself would have never come to God without having all of the rational thinking in place. They say that nobody can change those deeper desires until the rational building blocks are in place. And if you're a person who's sort of watching this curiously, not a believer in God, maybe thinks you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to be able to be a part of a church, stuff that you'd have to turn off your rational brain, I'd encourage you to look into it and discover, like I have, that the deeper you go, the more you find God in rational thought, in science, in biology, like I've been reading too, the more you find that fingerprint everywhere. As I've thought about those who are in the church, whether that be the church of biking or the church of some denomination, oftentimes we're like a teenager who daily has to struggle against the will of their parents. It is a daily thing where we have to surrender to God, to allow Him to be the boss, instead of us. We all want to be in charge and self-reliant. We want to trust ourselves. And it's hard, because when Jesus came as a king, not many wanted to receive Him. We read in John chapter 1 that He came down to His own, but His own did not receive Him. But to as many as receive Him, to those He has given the right to be called the children of God. To as many as receive Him, to those who believe in His name, He has given the right to be called children of God. That really changes everything. When I think about what exactly that changes, what practical difference does it make that God came? It's that not He's taking away all of our problems, but that He's joining us inside of our problems. and even suffering in a greater way, with us and for us, than we could ever imagine. We read in 1 Peter that we're to cast all our anxieties on him because he cares for you. Just from a neuroscience point of view, the benefit of casting our anxiety to God is immense. But then when you realize that this isn't just the imaginings or a crutch of somebody who is believing in something as a way to increase the positivity of their life, but that there is actually someone responsible, an author, who is in charge. When we cast our anxiety to him, we realize that we don't know what our future holds, but we know who holds our future. And that can radically transform the way that we live. It can give us hope, and it can get the kind of change with love, not from force, but the kind of change like a new baby coming, relationship and family. Things that change us from the inside and change the way we make decisions, change the way that we focus our lives. Not necessarily selfishly or destructively, but for love, for the help that we can give to other people. And there's no real greater change than being brought into our family. And that's exactly what God does. He adopts us into a family. He makes us children of God. And that's a hard family when we have to, like a child, accept the fact that there is a boss, a dad. I know my 2-year-old would not like there to be a dad in our family until he's in need, in great need, or in need of protection, or fearful. That's when he reaches out. But a lot of the times he just wants to be the boss. And I know that as we come to adults, we just want to be the boss more and more too. But God in the Seed of Hope can have us singing a new song. And the new song is that if God is for us, who could be against us? We don't have to work like that teenager grating against the rules of our father or our mother. We can find the harmony and the love in those rules as we get older, to find that those parents make those rules because they care about us, and to work within them is to find the perfect harmony and balance and health in the life that he has given us. Once we start singing that song, if God is for us, who can be against us, we have a hope in seeing every situation differently. And we can count it all joy, as James says in James chapter 1, when we meet all kinds of trials and difficult testing, because that will produce perseverance and it will produce patience in us. When I think about God with us, and I think about what that means, it doesn't mean that God is trying to fix our situation. It doesn't mean that he's always providing a solution for our situation. But it does mean that he's changing our hearts so that we're able to humbly receive him at Christmas, which is what we need to do, to humbly receive him as King. Not just over the world, but over us, which is the very hardest part to conquer. I'd invite you to allow him to come in, and you'll find that his conquering is not one of domination, not one of force, not a totalitarian dictator wanting to rule, but one of love, gentle, humble, who is willing to come and be with us in the midst of our suffering, who is willing to become a fragile baby so that he could be with us, so that he could offer us his love. And when we think of the problems, he's not just leaving us here stranded. It's not just some kind of imaginary remedy that makes us feel better in the midst of stress, or, as I've heard some atheists speak, if you're praying, that's actually the worst thing you could do, because, you're not actually doing anything about your problem. Well, when we understand the reality that there is a God, that there is one who will change, and we begin to trust his timing for that, we can say, like Paul did, that we don't lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner man is being renewed day by day. For our light and temporary affliction is producing for us eternal glory that far outweighs our troubles. So we fix our eyes not on what we can see, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. That comes from 2 Corinthians 4:18. Thanks for listening.